Hi everyone, and welcome to Brussels. Are you an entrepreneur considering an establishment in Europe? Do you want to know what steps you have to take to set up a company in Brussels? My name is Aleksandr Natanelow. I'm a tax and legal expert, and I will provide you with a short introduction to the general principles of creating an establishment in Belgium that a company needs to know when starting business operations in Brussels. You have developed business activities in Europe, and now you want to take this a step further and become an active market player. A local establishment is therefore a relevant option. I will take you through the most important aspects you need to know if you want to set up your establishment in Brussels. The first step, of course, is determining the right business type to set up to operate in Brussels, Belgium and Europe. In principle, there are two main possibilities. On the one hand, you have a branch office, and on the other hand, you have a subsidiary, which is a legal entity in its own right. Let us discuss the differences between the two. A branch is actually an extension of your legal entity in the US. This means that there is no separate legal entity to establish in Belgium. For this structure, there are no minimal capital requirements and no requirement to go to a notary in Belgium. From a marketing perspective, however, clients and counterparties may take note of the lack of a fully Belgian entity. For this reason, some companies will sometimes choose the other option, being a subsidiary instead of a branch. A subsidiary is a full legal entity in Belgium of a company with its headquarters in the United States. Within these two categories you have different options, so let us first begin with the subcategories of branches. Under the umbrella of a branch office there are two main options. There is a formal branch, the creation of which, as mentioned previously, is an extension of the legal entity in the United States and includes some requisite steps. There also exists a branch solely for tax purposes and is available if one simply intends to come to Belgium, rent space and start operating. It is called a permanent establishment, or a PE. This tax branch is a branch solely for tax purposes, with no legal registration, and is taxed on the profits allocated to that branch. This branch structure is common for companies already located in neighboring countries that simply maintain employees on the payroll in Brussels. For both types of branch office structures, the branch does not have its own financial accounts whatsoever. From a liability and responsibility point of view, this means the local US company will be responsible for previous actions of the branch. The alternative form to any type of branch is a subsidiary. Similar to the options for a branch, there are two types of legal entities that a company can choose to establish itself in Belgium. The first is a public limited liability company, Inc. in the United States, also called een naamloze vennootschap, NV in Dutch, or Société Anonyme SA in French. To establish this type of subsidiary requires a minimum capital of €61,500. 25% of this capital should be paid up front, so you do not need to pay the entire amount at the time of establishment. You also need a written financial plan as well as have the establishment documents notarized in Belgium. We'll have an appointment with a notary who will prepare the bylaws, with your input of course, and will formalize the establishment of the company. The second type of subsidiary is a private limited company, LLC in the United States, called a besloten vennootschap, BV in Dutch, or Société à responsabilité limitée, SRL in French. The difference between this structure and the NV discussed previously is that it does not require any minimum capital. This is actually quite new in Belgian law and makes the BV a flexible vehicle, as you can open a BV with €1, so as long as you have demonstrated sufficient assets to conduct business, have planned to operate in Brussels or in Europe, have a financial plan and notarized establishment documents like the NV. Now that you have a general definition of these two types of subsidiaries, it is worth elaborating some of the main differences between them. A general rule of thumb is that the BV structure is more commonly associated with smaller companies, while NV with larger companies, though you will occasionally find large companies structured as BVs. This is apparent in the fact that the NV structure is much easier than the BV in regards to exchanging shares between shareholders. In practice, this can be done in a BV as well, but the process will need to be established in the bylaws created in coordination with the notary. A further difference between the two subsidiary structures is the form of administration or management. A BV allows for one or more directors and there is no need for a board. The directors can also be appointed by the Articles of Association, by the General Assembly, thus reducing time and making the process easier than that found in an NV. In an NV there is a wide range of options available and is thus common for larger companies, but the procedure is more rigid. For example, one can establish a board with 3 directors or even a 2-tier board made up of executive and supervisory boards. However, you can also opt appointing just one director in the NV. More complex structures can also be created under the NV. In terms of General Assembly for the NV, the shareholders must gather every year and approve the annual accounts and determine that everything went well in the last year. There is a fixed time and day for this assembly. It is also now possible to conduct these assemblies virtually. The auditing criteria are the same for the NV and BV structure, such that you will need to appoint an auditor should you exceed any of the following 3 criteria. On average, you employ more than 50 people, your annual turnover is 9 million euros or more, or your balance total is more than 4.5 million euros. It is worth paying careful attention to these criteria as the balance total can be exceeded quite quickly. And depending on your activities, the employee number can be exceeded quite quickly as well. Though these are 2 main types of legal entities that are advisable to foreign companies establishing an entity in Belgium, it is worth noting that there are other types of entities that can be established that do not require some of the steps or requirements for the NV or BV. But they are quite uncommon for foreign investors. The establishment of these entities is definitely possible, but are rarely advisable. So we will not go into detail at this stage. Once you have determined the legal structure you would like your Belgian entity to take, it will be necessary to open a Belgian bank account in order to proceed drafting your articles of association in coordination with the notary. The notary will also help prepare the necessary bylaws of your company specific to your individual circumstances. To establish your company, you will also need a certificate from the bank that states, in the case of the NV, that the minimum capital requirement is on the account. The aforementioned financial plan will also be necessary, but is largely an internal document, solely reopened if there is a financial difficulty with the company in the first 3 years. Thus, if the business progresses normally, the financial plan will not be consulted. Once the company is established, it will be published in the CBO database, meaning Crossroads Bank for Enterprises, and be allocated a public company number. This number will also be used for VAT purposes and registration for social security purposes, and other insurance on behalf of your employees, if applicable. With this, you will be ready to send out your first invoice and start taking advantage of your new excellent location in Brussels. I hope that I have given you a clear insight, and hopefully this triggers your interest in setting up your business in beautiful Brussels. We hope to see you soon.